Fertilization. This is the fusion of sperm and ovum to form a zygote. In mammals, it occurs in the oviduct or the fallopian tube. The human ovum is viable for only 24 hours, after which it degenerates. Usually, fertilization occurs in the upper parts of the fallopian tube. Now, as the sperm approaches the ovum, it undergoes reconstruction to enable it penetrate the walls or the membranes of the ovum. This includes the rupturing of the acrosome so as to release the lytic enzymes. The enzymes digest and soften the corona radiata. See what is happening here? So there are many sperms that approach the ovum. This is the ovum. There's many sperms that approach it, and they all rupture their acrosome to release the lytic enzymes. The enzymes digest and soften the corona radiata, the outer layer of follicle cells, and it also softens the other membranes. It softens the other membranes that surround the ovum. Now, only one sperm fertilizes the ovum. Even though there are many of them that will approach, only one will penetrate. Now, the reason why only one sperm penetrates is because upon the entry of that first sperm, the vitelline membrane of the ovum is transformed into an impenetrable membrane known as the fertilization membrane to exclude any more sperms from entering. Now, once the head of the sperm has penetrated, the nucleus is released and the sperm's nucleus fuses with that of the ovum to form the first zygote. And development starts immediately after this fusion. The zygote undergoes repeated mitotic division in a process known as cleavage. So here you have the first cleavage division taking place to produce a two-cell stage. This happens repeatedly as the fertilized ovum moves down the fallopian tube towards the uterus. So we can see the increase in the number of cells as there is repeated mitotic division that takes place. Now, as the cleavage continues, there's a formation of a mass of cells known as morula. You have the early morula. The cleavage continues, forming an advanced morula that has many cells. Then the cells rearrange themselves to form a hollow structure known as the blastocyst. The movement of the morula down the fallopian tube is brought about by the ciliary beatings of the fallopian tube and the peristaltic action of the fallopian tube wall, thereby propelling the mass of cells towards the uterus. Upon reaching the uterus, the blastocyst, which has a large cavity at the center known as the blastocele. So the blastocyst, upon reaching the uterus, embeds itself into the uterine wall at about 7 to 8 days after fertilization in a process known as implantation. So the implantation occurs when the blastocyst embeds or buries itself into the uterine wall. Once implanted, the blastula secretes the hormone. There is a hormone that is secreted from this point known as the human chorionic gonadotropin. Chorionic gonadotropin. the human chorionic gonadotropin, whose functions are: 1. It prevents the regression of the corpus luteum. This corpus luteum, the remains of the follicle after ovulation. Once the ovum has been released during ovulation, it enters the fallopian tube where fertilization takes place. Now, the remains of the follicle, the Graafian follicle, is transformed into the corpus luteum. One function of the corpus luteum is secretion of the progesterone, which helps to maintain the wall of the uterus. So, this human chorionic gonadotropin prevents the regression of the corpus luteum so that it can continue secreting the hormone progesterone. And in this way, it also inhibits the disintegration of the uterine lining, thus preventing menstruation. Now, on implantation, the blastula develops into the embryo and its associated membranes. The embryo, or at a later stage, what's known as the fetus, has its membranes that surround it. The innermost cells become the embryo that is of the blastocyst. The innermost cells become the embryo, and the walls form the various membranes. The outermost wall becomes the chorion, and then the others. So the chorion forms the finger-like projections known as the chorionic villi, which grow into the endometrium, that is the walls of the uterus. Then beneath the chorion, there is the amnion. The amnion surrounds the embryo, forming the amniotic cavity. The membranes of the amnion secrete the amniotic fluid in which the embryo is suspended. So here you have the amniotic fluid in which the embryo is suspended to allow for proper development. The amniotic fluid also acts as a shock absorber to protect the embryo from mechanical injury. Another membrane that forms in the human is the yolk sac. Now, this yolk sac has no significant function in placental mammals such as humans. But in the oviparous animals, such as the birds, the yolk sac is the main food storage structure. Now, the embryo grows and develops within the amniotic sac, and as it develops, it assumes a distinct human form. It is at this point that it is known as the fetus. Once the embryo has attained the distinct human features, then it is known as a fetus. Now, the placenta is a very specialized and important structure during pregnancy. It is disc-shaped. It is shaped like a disc here. And it is composed of cells from both the fetus and the mother. The fetal cells consist of the chorionic membrane and the blood capillaries. The maternal tissues consist of the endometrium. So that the placenta is a mixture of maternal and the fetal tissues. The embryo is attached to the placenta by the umbilical cord. This is the umbilical cord, and it carries the umbilical blood vessels, that is the umbilical vein and umbilical arteries. The umbilical artery, these the umbilical arteries bring blood that has waste such as carbon dioxide and urea from the fetus to the placenta, while the umbilical vein carries blood that is rich in oxygen, hormones, and nutrients such as glucose, amino acids, which are delivered to the fetus. The functions of the placenta are as follows. 1. It is a site of exchange of materials between the fetus and the mother. And the substances exchanged as mentioned are nutrients from the mother's blood to the fetal blood. Waste materials from the fetal blood to the mother's blood, for example, carbon dioxide and urea, are also exchanged at the placenta. Oxygen from the mother to the fetus is also exchanged at this site. Now, the absorption of oxygen is enhanced by the fetal hemoglobin, which has a high affinity for oxygen than the maternal hemoglobin. This ensures extraction of oxygen from the mother to the fetus. So, apart from the site of exchange, a second function of the placenta is that it shields the fetus from the high blood pressure of the maternal circulation, because the mother's blood flows under high pressure, whereas the fetus capillaries are still small and delicate, so there's a risk of them being ruptured. So the placenta shields the fetus from the high pressure of the maternal circulation. 3. The third function is that it being semi-permeable, the placenta protects the fetus from bacteria, fungal, and other blood parasitic worms infections that may be present in the maternal blood. However, viruses such as HIV may pass through. Harmful substances such as alcohol and heroin, if present in the mother's blood, will pass through the fetus. So, as much as the placenta shields and protects the fetus from certain harmful substances, there are those that are small enough to pass across the barrier. The fourth function of the placenta is that it secretes hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, and human chorionic gonadotropin, and also human placental lactogen. Now, the exchange of substances at the placenta is determined by the molecular size and concentration gradient. Movement of substances across is mainly by diffusion. Now, to enhance diffusion, the placenta has the following adaptations. 1. It presents a large surface area. This is further increased by the chorionic. These are the chorionic villi. To increase the rate at which substances exchange or move across. Secondly, the placenta has a thin membrane or barrier separating maternal and fetal blood for faster exchange of substances. Here, the maternal blood comes into these blood spaces. So the only barrier between the maternal blood and the fetal blood is the chorionic membrane that makes up the chorionic villi and the chorionic blood capillary walls. So the two barriers, the walls of the capillary walls in the fetus and the wall of the chorionic membrane. So this greatly enhances the movement of substances across. Third, the placenta is selectively permeable to prevent blood cells and pathogens from crossing over. And 4, in the placenta, there's a counter current flow system between the fetal and the maternal circulation. So the maternal blood will flow in this direction while the fetal blood flows in the opposite direction. So that counter current flow greatly enhances exchange of substances. Gestation period. Now, gestation refers to the carrying of an embryo or fetus inside the body of a viviparous female animal, especially mammals. Gestation is the carrying of an embryo or fetus inside the body of a viviparous female, especially mammals, while gestation period refers to the duration of pregnancy from fertilization to birth. The period varies from one mammal to another. In human beings, gestation lasts for 9 months. So from the time of implantation to the time of birth, it takes 9 months in human beings. During this time, the embryo undergoes various stages of development, and by the end of the 9th month, all the organs and organ systems are fully formed, and the fetus has turned with the head, see the head, directly above the cervix, so that birth may occur. Now, in some cases, ectopic pregnancies do occur. What is an ectopic pregnancy? This is when the embryo is implanted in an area other than the uterus. That is, when the embryo is implanted outside the uterus. The commonest ectopic site is the fallopian tube. So here you can see this is a uterus, and the embryo has been implanted in the fallopian tube. Now, it is a fetal condition, especially where the fallopian tube bursts. So this must be terminated by a doctor before the fallopian tube ruptures. To save both the embryo and especially the mother, the pregnancy must be terminated. Now, there are cases again when you have, instead of just one embryo developing, there could be more than one. So talk about multiple births. Multiple births occur when more than one fetus is carried to term in a single pregnancy. There are different types of multiple births depending on the number of offspring that are present. Example, twins when they have 2, triplets when they are 3, and quadruplets when they are 4. So we look at an example of twins. There are 2 forms of twins: identical and fraternal twins. Identical twins come about from one egg fertilized by one sperm, which during cleavage stage, the resulting embryo splits into 2 groups of cells, each developing into separate individuals. Such individuals are genetically identical and have many characteristics in common, such as they share the same sex. And in identical twins, the embryos share the same placenta, even though each embryo is surrounded by its own amniotic sac. In the fraternal twins, 2 eggs are released into the oviduct at the same time, and then the 2 eggs are fertilized by different sperms to form 2 zygotes. So we have 2 different ova and 2 sperms, and each ovum is fertilized separately. As a result, you have 2 different embryos, each with its own placenta, and they develop differently. Fraternal twins are not genetically identical. They are genetically different. In fact, in many cases, they even belong to different sexes.